stuck in this kind of strange place where I'm looking at, trying to see if I can fix this damn thing. The game is not near over, but most of the turn actions aren't terribly interesting, and I don't know if it's worth, you know, the level of zooming in that we've been doing throughout the entire game. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in when there's particularly interesting actions underway. The problem with that, of course, is I often will only catch them after the fact. I usually do this with heroes. It's harder than it is with war games where there's a good narrative. But for the most part, in this game, I can probably come back and say nothing much happened for a turn. Because it really hasn't been. The card selection often is just, hey, jiggle some points around at this point. Because almost no one can do anything military. And everybody is so far back in the cache, because they're so far back on the will, on the will chart, that they're paying so much for every action that they do take, that the game has really reached a certain static point. Though I am going to step in because I saw a card come up. The Revolt of the Camelsars, I think. Eliminate 2 French troops not adjacent by land. If none exist, eliminate them from the reserve. Okay. So we've handled that as, hey, they die from here and go over here. But here's what's weird. There's another card that we played a while back, Ilbersheim. 3 or less Bavarian troops remain in the map. Eliminate all Bavarian troops from the map and the reserve. Otherwise, eliminate 2 Bavarian troops. Now this says eliminate from the game, and I think we didn't do this. I think it got eliminated I think it got played twice, to tell you the truth. Once to remove the 2 troops, and I forgot to remove the card from the game. And second, but here's the thing. What does it mean to eliminate them from the reserve in that case? And does that mean that there should be some French cubes out of here because they got eliminated from the reserve? I don't know. And this is the kind of thing that the game's not very good at explaining. Basically, this game did not go through the level of rigorous playtesting that the quality of the components sort of demands. And given that it's a reprint of a foreign-produced game, you really kind of wonder about that. Of course, Americans are well known for demanding more precise rules, I think, than Europeans in general are. I know that used to be the case back in the 80s and 90s, is you'd hear English especially, but Europeans saying, Americans are all rules lawyers, you know. On the other hand, when you look at, say, the Azure Wish stuff, or Games Workshop stuff, which just had holes so big you could drive trucks through, you felt like, well, there's got to be, you know, a middle ground here. And I think a lot of games in that era were better in terms of leaving things a little bit open. Nowadays, companies like GMT and everything seem to try to really nail down the rules. Some companies not so much, but GMT really tries to nail down the rules, especially when you get to somebody like Mark Herman. And I think that's actually to the detriment of the game. But this is ambiguous to levels where I feel like there's a significant percentage of the cards that there are going to have to be questions asked on. It's strange that it made it through. Now maybe that ambiguity got added in the translation, but it doesn't really feel like it. It feels like the rules booklet was too small and didn't define enough things, and the cards are too small to express all the implications. For example, the implication of eliminate from the reserve. What does that mean? What does that mean when this is the reserve for the French, but this is sort of the reserve for all the other countries, and the French have one of these, and what's up with that? And there's just a lot of stuff that gives you the feeling that it wasn't blind tested, that it was play tested with the developer there, far too much, or play tested with one person reading the rules and interpreting them, and then not writing down all the questions, or else maybe the developer just, you know, ignoring the blind test results. That's always a possibility too. But certainly the English language version has some pretty big issues there, where I feel like there's going to be a living compendium that's going to have answers to, you know, I would say maybe a third to a quarter of the cards. I'll have a question specified on them. And that's a shame. A game of this level shouldn't have, you know, that kind of questions raised about it, probably. Not a lot of war activity going on. The Savoyans have marched down to grab control of some of the areas that got them some victory points with the move action. This agreement of L'Hôpital, the poor Brits had to play this. They had no action they could take. They can't boost their money to deal with the Asiento, which is screwing them over. 2 barricades gone, and it killed their units out of Barcelona. 3 victory points they lost there. This was just a hosed card for them, and having to get it was bad. They don't mind the barricades going. They're in good shape. One hard choice was for the Portuguese, playing the clause 13 of Utrecht. This gives a penalty to whoever has the Pact of Genoa, because it pretty much dissolves the Aragonese special constitution. Their choice was basically play this for points and get to do nothing, because there were really no spaces left. They could do a recruit that would cost them $3 to do, or play the, and they have a few extra troops, and they really want to get like Gibraltar or something. They don't have a lot of victory points, which is why triggering the event for this is kind of iffy, because it killed a barricade. We're down to only 2 barricades. It looks like the game's almost over. But on the other hand, they're penalizing these 2 players. Their other action didn't really give them any ground on anyone. So they're kind of not playing for first place here. Had they played for first place, they probably would have played for a delay of game, but that would help these guys somewhat, I guess. It's probably a lost cause here. There's just so many Bourbon troops. All right, so we're on to another turn, and it really, the turns really are not that difficult once you get out of the reinforcement and concession point. All you have to worry about is remembering to move these, which I never do anyhow. Interesting factor is when you look at, I see the Swift and Defoe cards both come up. There's a sort of, overall the game has, I would say, a fair basis across all the different nationalities. But there is a clear, hey, these are both English, and why is this? They both have effects on non-English players as well, which I think may be actually somewhat disingenuous, because the truth of the matter is the pamphleteers in this era, I would suspect, don't have as strong an effect on any other country. The Dutch still felt like they were fighting for their lives here. Yeah, with the idea of the French border moving right up against them. They were happier, you know, with Habsburgs holding Flanders. So they would be less likely to be swayed by pamphleteers. And most of the other nations don't have the kind of freedom that the English did. Now, we're not talking about a full freedom of the press here, but there was also more of a populism at play in both, at least parts of England and the Netherlands, compared to what was really available to move the populace in some of these other nations, and especially among the literate classes. So there's something a little wrong about applying these to any country you like. And that's how they actually work. Swift can be used against anyone. Obviously, that wouldn't be Swift, but there is kind of a reason why it's the English pamphleteers who were able to affect national will so much that they get cards in here. So there's something a little twisted about that, but looks like we're losing one more barricade. I think the barricades probably, there aren't a lot of extra cards to wear them all out. The thing is, though, there's just so many Bourbon troops that it's almost impossible. The players have to really concentrate to knock the Bourbon out of the game, and it's not in everybody's interest. It's in a couple of players' interests. So now we're down to the last. It could be triggered at any point. There are a decent number of cards left, so there's no guarantees. I don't know what the distribution is. We had some interesting actions here. Let's pull this out. We had... well, let's look at orange first. Orange did a resources action. After triggering, they had the 0 event that they were able to clear Ostend out. So they might actually be able to capture a couple of locations. And the French can reoccupy those if they get an opportunity. But they basically pulled out to go into the south here with the Spaniards. Ooh, what about our Poiples? Poiples, they triggered an event. I don't remember what the event was. I can't tell you anymore. Yeah. Oh, they triggered the Siege of Turin, which gave them a couple of pieces, and they're poised to do more still, because everybody's in the war now again except England. White, the Austrians, they did a recruiting action with the points they gained, and you can see they're again poised maybe to be able to do something. With a movement action, they could go join the Savoyans there. It's not like your enemies, the enemy players can block you except by throwing a lot of troops into a place. If they get 3 units in one space, you can't enter it. The Brits took their points and could do nothing. They basically had no options except upping their will to fight, and they don't want to pay points for that. They need to gain points. They need to get themselves up to above 10 because that stupid Asiento they got stuck with. And then finally the Portuguese, they also used their card for points, could have played with national wills, but it's not absolutely clear they want to have a high national will because of the Clause 13. That kind of makes it so you no longer want to be the best in national will. In fact, the Austrians are trying to figure out how to get theirs down now because they've got a penalty on them. On the other hand, they've got a bonus if this holds out somehow. It's not going to happen. It's impossible. I'm convinced of it at this point. And what they managed to do was they shipped a unit back to Lisbon and over to Barcelona. That's a decent amount of victory points, 3 victory points. So that's going to be, kind of neat. Now I find it kind of strange that Aragon can remain completely yellow controlled pretty much and everything, yet the siege of Barcelona is still happening. But so much in this game is just an abstraction that you got to pretend that's something else happening there. And that it's not really the Catalans because they're clearly holding out here. About the potential rise of the concessions, whatever, the game loses a lot of its kind of interest. It just falls into this really, really simple pattern. Place the cards, pick a card, take an action, mark them here, and then just keep rolling around. You don't have generally the reinforcements or concessions. There's just nothing. They don't usually happen in most turns anyway, but there's no possibility of that. And you've got kind of this weird situations where there's holes in the line and everything. So like I said, the whole military situation is really just some kind of weird abstraction that I'm not sure it's even meant to represent anything. I think it does at the beginning of the game, but it stops as you're going, which is why I can't buy, any argument one way or the other as to why the French can't just like raise up troops down here, you know, not adjacent to their units within their own territory. There's nothing to lead one to believe anything except that if they can do that, they're kind of conforming with what the Allies can do. Anyway, those thoughts aside, I turned over one card. It's the Siege of Tortosa. I'm not going any further. This is the end of the game. Now, it doesn't trigger yet. I get to play out all these other cards, and everybody gets to pick where they want to go and everything, and then this card gets executed, and the game ends, which basically means we don't have to deal any more cards out. We do have to execute this card, though, and orange, should they desire, may take it. Eliminate one allied troop from the Crown of Castile or the Crown of Aragon. This is going to be gone. And I eliminate another allied troop. Okay. None of that terribly matters, except I can get rid of a Portuguese. That's worth victory points. I can get rid of something that's adjacent to a Frenchman. This is orange doing it. Well, there aren't too many things that are adjacent to the French. I certainly am not going to do it to the Imperials. I can't do it effectively to the Austrians. The Brits have nothing. So it comes down to hitting one of these. Let's see if I realize the simple fact that these guys, oh, these aren't adjacent. So this is the only valuable piece I can kill. I wanted to see if I could realize that Savoy kept moving into this space. And those are the special effects for the card. I get 0 points for it. What's orange's current value? Orange's current value is 4. I could do an action, and I will. I'm going to do a move action because I'm allowed to. I think that's the only action I can do that will get me any victory points. Let's see what we can optimize. Minorca, we could get down there, and that would be worth 2. Bresgau, that would be worth 2. We might not be able to get there for 4. And Hudson Bay, we can't do. So the best thing I think we could do would be Minorca, except there's Barcelona. So for $3, which does not drop us below 0, we make it into Barcelona, which has just fallen here. And now it's time to score the game. And, largely, I'm going to spreadsheet that out, because watching me count the points and write them down isn't going to be terribly useful. But I will come back and talk a little bit about how they fell out. In particular, you know, we've got interesting things like this situation, which causes a penalty there. This and this do not cause an advantage. All kinds of little things to keep track of. And then, of course, did you get anything doubled by making your objectives? Okay, so we scored out our points. The English have nothing on the board. The Portuguese 2, Savoy 2, Austria 4, Netherlands 3. Where did the points come from? Portugal, over here in Minorca. Savoy, Tuscany, which in both cases they had the card for that to double the value. Austria got 2 for here, and then a couple more over there. And the Netherlands got 3 for making their way into Barcelona at the end of the game on the last card. Had they not been the #1 guy on the last card, and there were cards that could allow somebody to switch or something, they would not have been able to get that. Okay. And that is perhaps a key value. For concessions, when I multiplied them out, let's see, our leader there is England with 14 in concessions. They managed to succeed on a lot of theirs. In 2 of their big 3-pointers they managed to get. And then they didn't get Sicily, but they got another big 3-pointer and a 1-pointer. So no big deal there. The Portuguese... Now, the Netherlands is next with 13, again managing to match up. Bresgau and Hudson Bay giving them 10, Milan another 3. Austria got 11. doubling up on Flanders, and then the others just being the points they got. We did Portugal got 12, a little bit more. They matched up on Naples and Menorca, and then got some extra points for Gibraltar. And poor Savoy only got 7. They didn't manage to match any of their concessions that they were able to pick up. Now that's a hard thing, and to some extent it's, you know, what can you keep secret and whatever, but to a large extent what it is just how can you manipulate the turn orders? Are you in the right place at the right time? You don't know when the victory point card is going to come up. So it's hard to set yourself up in the turn order. There are a couple of cards, a couple of the characters, and they're expensive cards, but they do seem worthwhile for that. I didn't get to use it. I didn't use any of them for that. That allow you to mutate the turn order a little bit. I think there's 2 different ones that allow it, but it may only be 1. So there's not a lot of opportunity, and otherwise it's just kind of the luck. Try to stay high up on the turn order when there's any possibility of anything happening, but certainly of concessions coming out. And there's always some possibility, so, you know, until the end of the game, and at the end of the game you don't. But then some of it has to do with, hey, you know, did you get the opportunity to grab the card that allows you to switch with someone else? Do you take that card to, if you have the opportunity to prevent someone else from switching with you, or do you feel safe? Do you think nobody's going to really go for you? If you're sitting on a lot of valuable properties to you, you probably want to cover that card and make sure nobody else gets it, because these are really valuable. Then everybody took a penalty for how far down they were in money. Now the English were up +5, but they lose $10 because of the asiento. So they're taking a 5-point penalty right there. Savoy was all the way down at -10. And you can see, you know, the points weren't all that far apart. And then this was the final score. And then one final thing, which is Clause 13. And Clause 13 said, hey, 2 points off Austria and Savoy. Poor Savoy, who was in last place anyway, got hit by it. But Austria was in second place, and they managed to hold pretty well. Would I have guessed that the Dutch, with no pieces on the board, were so clearly in first place? Well, if it hadn't been for the... I mean, no. They didn't look that impressive. They're sitting on 3 properties. They got lucky at the end of the game and managed to get 3 points for Barcelona. And I guess the biggest thing was they weren't negative on money, so they didn't take the penalty on that. It feels a little bit of a letdown, but to tell you the truth, the whole sort of last half of the game after the reinforcements and the treaties are kind of... the concessions have all been handed out. It's all felt kind of downhill. It was really exciting at the beginning. But then again, it's not a very long game. And that first part was a lot of fun. I'll come back with the review after I load this up and clean it up.